When we think of the United Nations, we usually picture those pristine glass towers in New York, or perhaps the image of a white dove. We think of the blue helmets as the world's emergency responders, the secular angels sent to stop the bleeding in the world's most broken places. But if you step away from the press releases and walk down the darker corridors of the organization's history, a much more haunting image emerges. It's a story of how the saviors sometimes become the predators, and how the very flag meant to represent sanctuary has at times flown over scenes of betrayal. Take yourself back to 2014 in the Central African Republic. The country was tearing itself apart in a brutal civil war. International peacekeepers, mostly from France and across Africa, were sent in to restore order. But a horrifying pattern began to emerge in the shadows of the hunger. Soldiers were found to be using food rations as a currency for innocence. They targeted children, kids who were starving, and offered them a few cents or a single meal in exchange for sexual acts. What's perhaps more chilling is how the system reacted. It wasn't a UN investigator who blew the whistle. It was a high-ranking official named Anders Kompas. When he realized the bureaucracy was trying to bury the evidence to save face, he leaked the documents himself. The UN didn't reward his integrity. Instead, they suspended him and accused him of breaking confidentiality protocols. It was a clear message. The reputation of the institution mattered more than the lives of the children it was sent to protect. This isn't an isolated incident. If you travel to the coast of Haiti, you'll hear a term that carries a heavy weight of shame: petit minusta. It refers to hundreds of children fathered by UN peacekeepers who then simply packed their bags and went home when their tours ended. These soldiers left behind a generation of fatherless children and mothers living in deep poverty, burdened by social stigma and no legal way to claim child support. Because of the UN's legal structure, these men are effectively untouchable. They have what we call functional immunity. The UN can't put a soldier on trial. They can only send them home. And once they're home, their own governments often quiet the scandal to protect the military's image. Between 2004 and 2016, there were over 2,000 formal complaints, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Most victims are too terrified or too ashamed to ever speak up. But if you want to understand the absolute nadir of this moral collapse, you have to look at a small town in Bosnia called Srebrenica. In 1995, the UN declared this a safe area. People trusted that title. They gave up their weapons and flocked to a UN base in Potocari, believing the blue helmets were their shield. But they had unknowingly walked into a trap of bureaucracy. When the Serbian forces arrived, the Dutch peacekeepers on the ground asked for NATO air support. They asked again and again, but the paperwork got stuck in the UN's labyrinthine chain of command. What happened next is one of the most stomach-turning images in modern history. The Dutch commander, Colonel Tom Karaman's, was filmed sharing drinks and pleasantries with the Serbian general, Ratko Mladic. While they toasted, Mladic's men were just meters away, separating men from women. Under pressure, the peacekeepers actually forced 5,000 refugees out of the safety of their base and handed them directly over to the death squads. In less than 3 days, over 8,000 men and boys were slaughtered. The survivors will tell you that as painful as the enemy's cruelty was, it was the betrayal of the friend that left the deepest scar. Today, the UN talks a lot about the responsibility to protect. There have been apologies and even government resignations over these failures. But as long as political interests and legal immunity are placed above human dignity, the organization remains a paradox. It's a body that preaches peace while sometimes harboring those who destroy it. We have to ask ourselves, if the world's police force is above the law, who is actually being kept safe? The story of the Blue Helmets isn't just a history of war. It's a warning about what happens when an institution becomes so large and so shielded that it loses its soul in its own hallways.